many times do you think it'll take me to get this intro correct?
I'm gonna go for first shot.
Oh, thanks.
I
Wow.
have faith in you.
Such confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Friends and foes, welcome to Brushwork Podcast. My name is Stephanie Scott. Today I have my Art Book Club co-host, Visual Nomad, who's also known as Jennifer. And today we read, not today, this month, this past 5 weeks, we read Get the Picture by Bianca Bosker. And this sure was a book we read. Well, did you, raise your hand if you finished the book. I finished the book. Are you raising your hand?
I did not finish the book.
Okay. How far did you get?
Quite a ways through it, but I got about halfway through it.
Halfway. All right. That's pretty good. Good. Do you have the physical book on you?
No, I don't.
Right. Ebook?
I have an
Okay.
ebook.
That's going to pertain to a later question I have, which it's has to do. There's a single picture in this book, and it confused me a lot, and I'm wondering if it's going to confuse you too. So I can't wait for this. Yeah.
Okay.
So this book, I feel like I should just give a synopsis of Get the Picture, just like a quick rundown of what it was like.
Okay.
This book is by a journalist who was looking at art, and she was looking around, and she was like, you know that thing called contemporary artwork that was made in the last 50 years or so? I don't understand it. And so she thought to herself, Bianca, let's go into the art world. But like many people out here in the world, the art world is like this tight-knit group of people who are so guarded and so you can't come into our circle, you can't sit with us at lunch sort of thing, that she was like, I'm going to email so many galleries asking for even one of them to let me come in and be their gallery assistant. And I think she sent over 100 of these emails, and everyone was like, no, or they ghosted her, or they're like, oh yeah, we could talk. And then nobody followed up. She was like, and then finally this one guy shows up and he's like, hi, I'm Jack. You should come work with me. I'll show you the ways. Sometimes I talk to MFA students and it'll be great. And she's like, yay. And then she goes and she talks to Jack and she works with him for a couple of months, but it turns into this toxic relationship. And she's like, I'm learning things, but I'm also learning that I don't like being here. And then she just kind of explores the art world that way. She goes to Art Basel in Miami. She goes and works as a security guard. She follows an artist around as an art assistant, and she spends a year and a half to 2 years in the art world and learns how to see and understand contemporary art. And that is the overstory of this book called Get the Picture. And I really liked it. Did you like it?
I did.
Nice.
I did.
Yeah.
It was very insightful, even as an artist. And
Exactly.
kind of talking to some of those people. It starts to make more sense as you hear some of the behind the scenes stuff.
Totally. I have been a quote unquote professional artist for a decade now, and I still feel the way that this author, this journalist felt about the art world. I feel like so many artists out here are so excited and have a lot of enthusiasm about getting into the art world, quote unquote, and getting their work in galleries and trying to understand things. And they're they want it so badly and can't find the entrance into the art world. Can't figure out how to get their foot in the door. They don't even know where the door is to get their foot into. And it's infuriating. And the amount of effort that this journalist put into this book is kind of outstanding. I was pretty impressed by how much tenacity she had. She was like, I really, really, really want to understand. Also, this author is extremely charismatic. This book, it's so smooth. She's so funny.
Yeah.
It's so easy to
It's very engaging. Yeah. I never got bored reading, for sure.
Totally.
It's very engaging.
So engaging. And yeah, there was a lot of questions that this book brought up beyond what is contemporary art and how do I understand it. It was what makes something art, which in our last book that we read, The Entanglement, talked a little bit from a philosopher's perspective about what art is, but that is another thing that she really wrestled with for many months. And
Right.
I think it's interesting to see a outsider's point of view, in a way, I'm going to call it.
Mm-hmm.
Someone
Yeah.
who's like
Yeah.
not primarily in the art, might even say not an outsider, but just like a normal person who's like kind of interested in
Right.
artwork and seeing their perspective. And I was kind of alarmed about how much I related to that normalcy. Just like so much of what happened in this book, I was like, I have not even glimpsed some of these things that she's talking about and some of these like
Right.
inner circles and the chaos of the art
Sure,
shows and stuff
sure,
like that.
sure.
Yeah. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was interesting, like, you said her unhealthy relationship with Jack, who is the gallery owner that she ends up being an assistant with.
Mm-hmm.
Just his, as harsh as he was, I think it was kind of the best introduction into the art world she could have had, because he was just as relentless as anybody else in the art world was going to be. Probably more forgiving in respects, like I think he had a soft spot for her, but
Mm-hmm.
he also, like, the best way to look at it is the art world is like the movie Mean Girls. It literally is.
It's so true.
You never know what the right answer is. It's constantly a moving target. And like in his teaching her of understanding what makes art, what collectors are looking for, that kind of thing, she learned that it was more about context than anything. Like, it didn't necessarily mean what was going on in front of your face. It was all the conversation and life that went on around the piece that meant more than anything.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Pooch says,
So it's like country club stuff, like they say,
yeah, it's mean. One of our Twitch chatters here is saying it's meaner in basically every way. It's just like,
yeah.
I'm not going to say more raw. It's more like pretentious.
Okay, let me give you a for instance on this, because I have a really good one.
Okay, give me it.
So she's like probably a good 2 months in or something like that with working with Jack. And Jack has always talked to her about her clothes, how she carries herself, what she talks about, what she listens to, what she reads, and all this stuff. And she has this day where she thinks that she's got it nailed. Like, she gets this sly little look from Jack whenever she shows up at this like hip and trendy party that's going on, that he like offhandedly invited her to meet up with him and his girlfriend. And she's like, oh, I'm one of the cool kids now. And they're like out on the floor dancing. And he's like, he leans over to her and whispers in her ear, you look like a janitor. And she's like, what? Like, what is literally going on? Like, I can never get this right. Like, that is exactly what the art world is like in a synopsis.
It really is.
That's what she's pointing out.
It's like months of her trying to fit in and trying to get it right and trying to get this like effortlessly cool thing. And she's like feeling herself. She's like, I nailed it today. And this guy's just like, no, you still don't get it.
Yeah. Even after he gives her like the approving nod, she thinks, and he like leans over and he's like, yeah, you stink.
There is something kind of fantastic about Jack's gallery being the first like instance of entrance into this world that she had that is so like rudimentary. And so like she's like, she knows nothing and she tries with so much enthusiasm. She's like multiple times in this book, she's like, I'm going to try and be useful. And, like all of her skills are like not utilized at all. The people that she works with are always like, hey, can you try and like paint this wall or stretch a canvas? And she had taken art school, like a class or two in her youth, I believe, or something like that. And she was like, oh yeah, I used to paint and I used to do these things, but it's like nowhere near the level that people demand of her. And sometimes people get a little underhanded with her and like would instruct her to do things in
Yeah.
certain ways that were not correct and then like reprimand it for her about it.
Um,
And there were so many times when people were like, oh, you are a writer, a journalist, no less, and therefore you are the enemy. And
yeah.
I feel like even if you are an artist trying to get into the world, it feels like you are the enemy. You are trying to like ruin something or be ruined, and it's so not something I ever want to participate with, and yet even that statement there means I'm participating with it in a different way. And it's weird. It's weird, but also I feel like it's akin to other kinds of spaces I've been in the past. I feel like it's similar to when I was an equestrian. It's the same sort of tiny, it's like a small world, and everyone knows each other, but also it's vast and, you know, new people come into the scene all the time. And it's still like, it has its dirty, dark sides, and it has its like glorious public persona that's kind of romantic. And it's just like, you kind of get to know people on surface level, or you even hear about them in like magazines, like art magazines or whatever. And I feel like everyone here knows certain artists in the world. You have the Da Vinci's, etc. And then you get to know the people, and you get to know the reality of what they're doing. And you see a lot of them are simply just trying to make a living, right? They're trying to sell enough art to maintain this gallery. And sometimes they have higher ethical purposes, which is like, there's a line in here when she's working for a different gallery. It's like her second gallery. And they're like, one of them is like, if every time we sell a piece of art, every like red dot is an angel getting its wings because it means an artist gets to keep making artwork. And I'm like, oh, thanks. So
oh my gosh, yeah.
That's so nice, and it feels validating. But other times you're just like, the greed. The greed is a lot.
Well, and I think the interesting thing is, and why I think Jack was like the perfect person for her to start with, was Jack was so conflicted, even as good at what he was doing, what he did, as he was, like, he would, you know, in one hand say, you know, I don't want to align myself with X, Y, and Z, but then he would turn around and do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
And like, she learned very quickly that the art world is very hypocritical in that respect. They want you to think that they're virtuous and pure and all this, but at the same time, it's like, because she even talks about them, you know, dividing galleries up into pure galleries, and you know, then you have your Guggenheims and the MoMAs and that kind of thing, museums, and just the different levels, and like. So this takes place in New York City. So you've got your Chelsea area. And like she says, it's really interesting because being there, you see it, like, you basically move your way up the island of Manhattan. All the artists work in Brooklyn. They all have these, you know, lofts and beautiful places to work in, blah, blah, blah. Then you work yourself over to Manhattan and you start in the financial district. Tribeca/financial district, and you work your way up through Midtown. And then you go to the east side and the west side and blah blah blah. So yeah, it's this rat race of, again, it's, I have to do this move to make this move to make this move, and you never know where you stand with anybody in that whole thing. It's about the conversations you have, the people that you associate with. It's all these. It's such this weird, like she says, this weird dialect that they created in France, from French, basically, to make them sound different so that they could set themselves apart.
It's interesting how the different kinds of people who play into this art world really affected her differently. Towards the latter half of the book that you didn't get to, she works at a art museum, and the chapters there are like, there's like 2 chapters and I basically skimmed through it because it didn't feel like it mattered as much as when she worked for a gallery or when she worked as a studio assistant to a particular artist. And it's it's funny the ways you can enter into the art world. You can enter as someone who just goes to museums when they travel. You can enter as an artist trying to sell their work. You can enter as someone who's trying to sell someone else's work. You can enter as a podcaster about art, and you're going to get responded to in much very different ways. And you said earlier, you mentioned context. It's a huge theme of this book.
Yeah.
How context changes not only the artwork, but also how people relate to you and if they've heard about you, and how you're going to have openings, not art show openings, but like openings into conversations. And
Sure.
and it's kind of, if you think about your whole, if you artist, if you think about your artwork as your career as a whole, and you think about all the opportunities you're going to need in order to quote unquote make it, whatever that means to you, it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming how much connection you need to get to this space specifically. What this book doesn't really go into, it sort of goes into it, but not truly, is if you are not in New York and you're just selling your work online, like truly only online. There's this one artist who she follows, and this artist is a performance artist. She does multimedia work also, and the performance artist does a lot of very like shock value, very sexualized work. Things you might find in OnlyFans, things you might find over the internet as thirst traps, etc. And she gets to talk to this artist and talks about how this sort of sexuality and this sort of provocativeness and like borderline going towards porn is hard to define as art. And it's interesting because the artist sees everything that she's doing as making art. All of her performances, at one point the author participates in this performance art and is called to have her face sat on by the artist for like 10 minutes. And it starts off a relationship with the artist for like 2 years, where they get coffee together and they talk about art and what is art, and how after the pandemic happens, the pandemic occurs at the very end of the book, where it's like she states at the very end, she's like, my relationship with the art world got cut off very abruptly by the pandemic. and that this performance artist went on to make most of her money on OnlyFans and things like that. And it's funny to think about art like that, performance art like that at all. Like when I'm online and I see content like that, I don't usually think of it as art. I think of it as entertainment. And where that line is something that she wrestles with a lot in this book. And I don't think she ever came to a conclusion about it. I thought that was super interesting. I really liked how deep into different areas of artwork in the art world that the author went into. Was there a particular section that you really liked?
I don't know necessarily. I just think for me, like, the main thing that I really got out of what I read was just this undercurrent of, like, everybody wants the same thing. Everybody wants to be able to be seen. Everybody wants to be recognized. Yet they're all like, they feel like there's only one seat in this game of, musical chairs.
Yeah.
And they're all trying to stab each other in the back to get in this chair. And, they talk to each other's face and they, they say nice things about them and they turn around and they're like, I can't believe them, blah, blah, blah. It gets super petty. And you're just like, I mean, as an artist, like, the one time that she's sitting with the artist and she's stretching canvases and stuff for her, and she's watching the artist like process through what she's going to paint, which pieces she's going to choose. She's flipping through a notebook and all this stuff. And like, to go from that part of it, like, as an artist, how do I fit into that other part of the world? How do I fit into like a gallery system or a museum system or art fairs or any of that, what is my place in that microcosm? Do I need to be that petty myself in
In
order
order
to
to get
get into
there.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah, like, should I focus less on what I'm actually doing and more on, like, quote unquote, the context around my pieces and make up some BS story about it? Like, yeah, I don't know.
It's all about what you really want with your art. I personally don't feel deep desires to be in this part of the art world. It doesn't feel attractive to
Right,
me. But if someone
right.
did, like they're out of an MFA program and they're just like, I want to be in galleries in New York City, especially this specific one, and I want to take my art to art fairs and I want my art to be sold like this. Here's what I got to do. Then that thought changes your behavior, and you are therefore more willing to get into these sort of states of mind
Sure,
and relationships with
sure.
people. And it also feeds on itself, and it's just, you know how some people were like, you got to network.
Yeah,
and sometimes that means doing things like this, where networking
sure.
is building relationships with people, and they might have, I don't know if they think of the way that they are acting in this book as petty. I think this is just the world they live
Right.
in. And I think that
Yeah.
is, we're seeing it from such an outside point of view here, that it's like, oh, that might be just normal. That might just be like
Agreed.
how it
Yeah.
is. Yeah. And you get a point past your own ethical boundaries where you'll
Mm.
come to a realization like that, and it can be abrupt and kind of rude to yourself. But as creatives, that is something to consider. I really
Yeah.
liked when she was for the section called The Studio, where she was a studio assistant. She went back to the person that she was stretching canvas for in that first instance and
Okay.
was like,
Right.
I'm looking to be a studio assistant. A lot of people have said no to me because I'm a journalist. This is like the repeat joke throughout the entire book. She spent 2 years in the art
Yeah.
world and people are
She's
still
the
afraid of her.
enemy.
The enemy.
Yeah.
And so she's like, hey, can I be your studio assistant? I will help you with everything. I've had a year under my belt at this point of being in galleries. I know how to write CVs. I know how to do all this stuff. So she becomes basically a studio manager for this woman. And
Okay.
she helps with all sorts of things. Like they start by painting her floors, and she does things like email people and manage different things and blah, blah, blah. And she learns about this part really, like, this part hit me more than any other part. This part was kind of tragic. So this artist, she sells her original work, and she already has gallery representation, and she's doing fairly good. Her work sells for around $2,000 a painting, and they are very complex, interesting, very contemporary work. Her works have been sold for, I think, a year or so at this point, and her work suddenly, very abruptly, starts entering the secondary market. While she's just kind of almost an emerging artist, and like maybe just exiting this. But so she's currently making her current collection, which sells for about $2,000 a painting, and her work that has been bought in the past year or so starts getting sold again for an absurd number. It starts getting sold again for $200,000 on average.
Right.
Meanwhile, she's making new work that's selling for $2,000 to $3,000 on average. Just like a staggering difference. And all of her previous collectors keep sending her messages being like, hey, I really need the money. I'm going to sell this painting that I bought from you last year. And it's causing this sort of cascading effect of pressure on this artist while our author is in her studio, where she's like, I'm not making any money off of these resells. You would think that, oh, now that my past work is being resold for $200,000, I can sell my current work for that much, but I can't, and I will never see any of that resale money. And I can't make enough paintings to satisfy the market. And also then this article comes out about her, and it's kind of disparaging, and now people are like trying to get rid of her paintings, and she's like, I have this new reputation around me and I can't get out from underneath it. Whoa. And we we don't really get a conclusion on what happened to the artist. All these people in this book are real. You can just look them up and see what they're doing now, which is kind of cool. But I was just like, oh, holy moly. I can't even begin to, like, they go up for sale at an auction, not back to her gallery where she sells her work, but they're being auctioned off for insane sums of money. And I feel like it would make me quit if that happened to me as an artist. Yeah. That was so intense.
I listened to a podcast a while back, and they were talking to an artist that she's fairly well known now, and they were talking to her about, you can't afford your own work now. Like, now that you're in that position because your work is selling for so much, how has your life changed? And she's like, well, that's the conversation we all need to have. Like, it was kind of around the whole idea of NFTs during that time, of giving royalties back to artists, so that they would get a bigger cut of the secondary market. They would actually get some of that money back.
Yeah.
And because I think that's the thing that is most confusing to some people, is like, they see these numbers on these pieces that are auctioned off, and the artists never see any of that.
Mm-mm.
Like, there's a huge disparagement between that and reality,
It's strange.
And so, yeah, it's tough to have that conversation. She talks about when she goes into that second gallery to do the Miami week with them.
Art Basel.
She talks about how she had talked to a couple different people that had worked at different galleries, and like, basically they lived in adjoining rooms in the gallery. They couldn't even scrounge up enough, like, money to buy ramen because they wouldn't pay them. Like, the one guy got left in, like, overseas. He had to finish the job in order to be able to get paid enough to get him back to America.
That's so insane.
And they, like, basically held him captive. And, like, it's a common thing that happens. Like, these gallery owners are basically enslaving these people in the gallery, like, literally in the physical gallery. And they're holding their paychecks hostage, and it's just like, it's frightening to hear some of the stuff that goes on in the art world.
Yeah. I feel like, yeah, it's strange to want to approach it when you hear, like, this giant book of a warning sign. And it's also like, okay, I also want to, maybe my definition of success is to be commercially successful and sell my artwork, and let whatever happens to the art after it's sold happen. And I feel like distancing yourself mentally away from that is, like, the only way to come out of this without losing your brain. And a couple of the people in this book that are interviewed are truly about loving art and about loving the creation and supporting artists, and that's really cool. And, like, there's this one moment at the end of the Miami Art Basel week where the author is like, where else in the world are you going to go to 3 weeks of parties and fairs and dinners and drinks and dancing where everyone's just shouting at each other about art the entire time because they love art that passionately? And I'm like, that's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Yeah. Do you want to play a little game?
Sure.
Okay, so in this book there's a picture, and I'm going to show y'all the picture. And I'm gonna pause and see if anyone can figure it out. It's a black and white. It's kind of like a Rorschach test. And okay. Well, okay. Here, I want you to tell me what you see. Here we go.
Maybe somebody, like, bending over.
Ooh, that's a good guess. you see someone screaming at the sky, Will. I want you all to know that I didn't see anything for like several minutes. I even did that thing where I like stared at the image for like a 2 minutes, and then I like looked off to the side to see if it like doubled and like did something else.
Mm-hmm.
this picture, are you ready for the spoilers? I see it now, and now I can't
Mm-hmm.
unsee it, and that's the point of this chapter. But it's a girl in a hat on this side kissing her horse's nose. It's like a cowboy hat. That's her face. And she's kissing the horse's nose, which is right here. Do you see it?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
It like flips, and that perception. Will sees it now. I think I stared at this one page for like a while. Like I could have kept reading, but instead I was like, "What is this image? What is this image? What is this image?" And it's interesting because when you look at something like this without the context, without me telling you what it was, I don't think you would have ever seen it. I think I wouldn't have. I stared at this thing for a while. And that's another thing about context, again, in this book that just continues, how having context around contemporary artwork changes things so much. She goes through this point during her time at the art museum later on in the book, where she's like trying to encourage people who visit the museum to not look at the labels, the tombstone label that they lovingly called it next to different artworks, so people could come to their own conclusion about things. But also, I feel like a major part of this book is that artwork doesn't exist without its context. It always has something giving it contextual meaning, whether that's your own information about the artist, whether that's what's being told to you when you're presented with the art, whether it's your history around art as a whole, like your knowledge of art history, and everything matters in understanding a picture. And that's cool because it's encouraging, and like a concrete thing you can do is just go learn more about art. And
sure.
Eventually you'll get it, but it's art is interesting. I don't know. Do you have any other thoughts about this book?
Well, and I think, that's one thing that Jack taught her a lot about was, like, he had constantly, like, given her stuff to read, to learn about. He told her, he would get into, like, what he thought about, paintings or pieces of art that were in the gallery, and she would be like, oh, now I see what he sees, because he has this context that has been, it's a conversation with this person that he had, and he knows this, and this about them because of that. And they use this color because they're from this place, and it makes them feel like this because, and he could identify like with one artist because he's like, I know what it was like to be kind of like a refugee in that situation, and how you feel closed in, and like there's so much more to art. And I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm constantly taking in information as an artist. Like, that is one of the biggest things that I can do is, find that context. Like, I'm constantly, like, I'm just curious. I've always been a curious person.
It's your prerogative as an artist.
Right. And so it's like, these are the things that interest me. And it's like, in order to be able to truly get what I'm putting down, you have to kind of understand that that's where I'm coming from if you truly want to get it the way that I'm getting it. Now, if I put it out there, like, I just want people to drive whatever they want, like a Rorschach test, that it'll speak more about how you've approached it than how I've approached it. That's a whole different situation. But like, like Jean-Michel Basquiat, for instance, a lot of people don't know. He sat down and he always constantly had a radio or a television on at all times. And a lot of his artwork has lines from things that he was hearing at the time in his pieces. He'll, like, a lot of the wording and stuff came from like, oh, it was a news, like the Sunday night news that I was watching that night, and they had a piece on this, and that's where it came up.
Well,
And I heard him say that, and I was like, wow, if you didn't know that about him, it makes those pieces so much more deep. Like,
yeah.
out of out of kind of the periphery of his life, this thing kind of echoed through to him while he's in the middle of creating, and it affected what was going on in front of him. And it touched him enough that it actually made it onto the canvas. Um,
That's cool.
so there's this constant interplay of things around, and so like, yeah, context is huge.
It matters a
Like, if you
lot.
don't have like, and I think, taking people to art shows with me and stuff, like, I think that's one of the things that I try to teach them most is like, it's not what you get at first. There's a context there. There was a lady that was in a show that I was in, um, and she did felted artworks. And the person that I took was like, well, that's kind of strange. Well, come to find out, this person was actually a potter for the longest time. And she has Parkinson's and she can no longer do pottery because she'd break a piece if she tried to take it out of the kiln.
Mm-hmm.
So she does felted pottery because she can't break it. And I was like, whoa, like, that's intense.
That's some good
Like,
context.
that's the story that you need to get behind that to understand, oh, wow, this is unbelievable. Like, yeah, it's weird, but it's cool,
I feel like if there's
So,
anything you're learning from this book, or, the royal we, is that context matters more than almost anything you can do as an artist. Like, more than networking, more than anything, providing context for your artwork, whether that's just
yeah,
in person at a show or it's online and you're talking about your art and you're making videos about your art and whatever. Like, it matters so much. And that's what people are connecting with. And when they understand it, they feel a deeper connection with. And it's really cool. Sure. It's good.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're storytellers. Ultimately, we're storytellers.
Yeah.
And the better you are at telling a story, the better you are at putting that context out there for other people to understand.
Pamela says artists are good at adapting, and it's true.
Yeah.
And think heck that we are.
I know, right? I think it's more out of survival than anything, A lot of us are just, scraping to get by. We've got to. We don't have a choice,
And we gotta make the art.
Be able to do what you love. Yep.
I feel like one thing I gained to appreciate this book was galleries, actually. I feel like I appreciate galleries more from this book. And I feel like the work that was done by these galleries in these stories is more work than a gallery has ever offered to me. And I'm like, oh, this is what true representation means. Like, all the things they were doing and paying attention to, and like the framing of a work and how they show something and how much care goes into curating something. Yeah. I think I had very little concept about it. Very like just surface level, but not And I think that's a lot cooler, and I respect galleries more now. I'm like,
sure,
these are pretty cool. Pretty cool people.
Sorry. And I think that's, as an artist, I think that's important to seek out, that you have to be diligent about who you connect yourself with. And Jack, impresses that upon her heavily. It's the deeper meaning in the conversation. Everything matters. Is this somebody that you want to have dinner with and hang out with, and you want to align yourself with, because they're speaking for your gallery just as much as anybody, just as much as yourself, because you've chosen this person to represent in your gallery. And so it's like, this is what I like, and you have to be able to get behind them and champion them. So you have to feel something about this. You have to be behind them. You have to truly like what they do. And as cutthroat and as hard as it seems, and it's a very New York thing, it's like, it's better to just be honest and say, hey, this isn't working for me, or this person isn't a good match for me, and move on. than to try to like drag it out and be like, oh, okay, let's try this out. No, like, Jack has been doing this long enough that he knows what works and what doesn't. He may seem cold, but in the end, is he really being kind,
Mm-hmm.
and not wasting either person's time? So, yeah,
Totally.
it's hard. It's really hard.
I think this book is great for the artist who is just emerging. I think this book is great for the artist who has been in the game for a long time. I feel like this book is especially good for people who are of no connection to the art world. Yep. It's a great insight. I'm giving this book a 5 out of 5.
I give it a 5 out of 5 as well, with as much as I read of it. It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Like, you get to really see the nitty-gritty, and I think this is something that you and I have really wanted from a book.
Yes.
Is like the nitty-gritty of that whole process. Like, it's every side. It's not just, a gallery or this is how you prep to get in or whatever. He gives you the bare bones of like, Jack just tells it like it is, and he's just like, this is, for good or bad, this is how people act in this world,
I need the author to write 10 more books about art. I'm like, are you still obsessed with art? Because I would read anything you wrote about art. It feels like the truth when you're reading it. Yeah, it feels like it's been fact checked. It feels like it's been thoroughly gone through, and it's so charming. Yeah, I highly recommend.
Well, and like the gallery people that she went to the second time that went to Miami, they said, you're just going to have to immerse yourself in it.
Yeah.
You're just going to have to get in there and get dirty. Like, and she was willing to do that. Like, she was willing to step out and, do what was asked of her. Like, she didn't care. She wasn't like too up on herself to be like, I'm sorry, I'm a writer. I don't have to do any of this. I'm just here to observe. She was just like, no, like, let me get dirty. Let me get yelled at by Jack. Let me have him belittle me and make me stay up and wake up in panic attacks in the middle of the night, like Casual. That kind of thing. And it took that. It's tough. Like, not many people are willing to do that. And like she says, artists are interesting people. They're not your normal folks. We are wired differently.
It's true. So good. Any last thoughts on this book?
It's a must read.
I think so too. I can't wait to hear your thoughts when you finish it.
Yeah, I think that anybody that is going into art as a study or wants to do it professionally, they have to read this book. Like, it's a must, because you're just going to get crushed if you don't. Like, I think you and I have learned a lot of this the hard way. We didn't have this book to lean on.
It's true.
And so we know some of this, from life experience, but if you can get down to it, like he does, like they go out to Yale and talk to some Yale students, and the girl that invited them, they go to dinner, and he just kind of gives her the rundown of like, this is how this is going to go. Like, if you want it to work, this is how you have to do it. And he's like, are you sure you want to do this? Because this is what it's going to cost, And it's tough. It's tough.
But worth it. You should try it.
Yeah.
It'll be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. This book is one I would give to people. This book is something I will recommend to people. It's so good. It's so great. It feels good to read a book that we actually truly loved. Again, it's nice. It feels good. All right. Are y'all ready for the next book for June?
Do it.
It's gonna be good. Okay, so let me lay the ground. Y'all know that really big painting at the Met called The Horse Fair? This painting changed... I'm not gonna say changed. I might say changed my life when I saw it. I saw it and I was like, I need to write a book about this. This painting is painted by Rosa Bonheur, who is a French painter who lived in the 1800s in Paris, and we're going to read a book about her life. This book is called Art as a Tyrant. It's the unconventional life of Rosa Bonheur, who was so queer and such a badass and such a phenomenal painter. She loved animals. She was all about nature and conserving nature. She was all about her. She had like two longtime loves, one who was essentially her wife when you couldn't marry another woman.
Okay.
And she was the kind of person that was like, you know what? I need to paint these horses. I need to paint these animals, but I can't do it when I'm dressed as a lady. So I'm going to go get a special license from the police saying that I can wear pants and no one will bother me. And then she went and did that. This woman is incredible. She's so good.
Wow. Okay.
And I think we're really going to like this book. I think we're going to like it. I love a queer icon. I love a painter who's so good that it made me stop in my tracks as a 19-year-old and the first time I went to New York City and just being like, oh, this is art. This is what I love this. And
nice.
Yeah, I think we're going to like it. I think it's about her entire life, and it's kind of novelized like The Agony and the Ecstasy was not as strongly, but like a little bit. So there's like dialogue happening. So I think we're gonna like it. So we'll see. That's our next book for June. Next month we are gonna be meeting a week later again, because your girl is going away from Twitch for a couple weeks to have a break. It's gonna be great. So you should enjoy that. So we'll be meeting on Father's Day, which is June 16th at 3 p.m. here on Twitch, and it's gonna be great. Yeah.
Nice.
What do you got coming up in the meantime, Nomad? What are you up to? Anything you want to talk about?
I'm working on a painting. I'm trying to heal up from being sick, and yeah, that's what I have on the horizon at the moment.
Excellent. I am working on lots of new content for the podcast, including some course reviews and a new interview coming out next week. And I'm excited for the future of brushwork, y'all. I've got fun plans for it. It's gonna be good.
Yeah.
If you want to find me online, I am at stephaniescott.art. That's my Instagram page and also my website. And you can find the podcast, which is at brushworkpod, over on Instagram. Where can people find you, Jen?
You can find me at visualnomad.art. And you can also find me here on Twitch at visualnomad. Instagram is visualnomad_. So yeah, you can find me at all those places.
We love to see it. I'll see y'all next month on June 16th. It's going to be great. In the meantime, have a great day. Make good choices. See you later, everyone. Goodbye.